Hey guys, Christina here, and today I have a look for you at what we read last month, which was April 2021. We are a family of 7 that really enjoys reading, and we homeschool, so a lot of our books tie in with our curriculum. My children are between the ages of 4 and 13 right now. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the read alouds that we did. So all these read alouds that I have here go along with our Story of the World Volume 4 that we are currently doing. The first one is When the Dikes Broke. This is by Alta Halverson Seymour. This is from the Good and the Beautiful library. It's a level 8. And it's about the flood in 1953 that swept over Holland. And it's about the Van Rosen family. And kind of how they wake up to the bells clanging and try to figure out what's going on, and then trying to find their family because they get separated, and some of the cleanup methods and what they're doing to try and salvage basically everything that's pretty much up to the ceiling, flooded. So this was a good book. I had never heard of the flood before, so it was very educational for me. My kids gave it kind of that 3.5, 4. I would say it's probably more like a 4.5 for me. I did enjoy it. I'll show you a look inside. There's just a few little drawings like this one. That's what it looks like inside. So that's the first one we read. And then we read Glory Be by Augustus Scattergood. And what a great last name that is. The book takes place in 1964 in the southern US, and it's about civil rights movement. And it's very simply written from a child's perspective, just kind of what's going on. They don't understand everything, right? But they understand enough to know something's not right and what's wrong. And it was a good book. My kids gave it about a 4. I would say 4 or 4.5 for sure. I thought it was a good book, a good one again about the civil rights movement, but from a child's perspective. They want to close the swimming pool in town because it needs to be open to everyone and they don't agree, and like that, things like that. Then we moved on to this one here, Stella by Starlight by Sharon M. Draper. And this is again kind of about the civil rights movement. It's in Bumblebee, North Carolina. And it's also about Black people having the right to vote and the challenges that they had to face in order to go and vote. I'll show you, look, this one's a thicker book. And they actually do have in the back here a discussion, what do they call it? A reading group guide. So that's helpful if you're doing this like with other people, but that's what it looks like. So we all gave it kind of a 4 to 5. It does have a few things that are maybe a little more mature, a little scarier maybe, but overall it was a good book, so I'd recommend that one. And then our last one was Lady Cake Farm. This is by Mabel Leigh Hunt, and it is a level 7 with the Good and the Beautiful. I'll show you inside. It's quite a short book. It's only 92 or 96 pages, something like that. And this one is in the mid-1900s. See, does it say exactly where? It doesn't say. But in the US, and a family that's moving to a farm, and again, civil rights and neighbors and dealing with race relations. This book, my kids gave it 3 to 3.5. I didn't like it though. And they used the N-word in here, which I know I've had this discussion before on changing literature versus keeping literature the same. I just felt like that word wasn't appropriate in a book that's deemed good and beautiful. So just be forewarned that that's in there. I probably won't read it again. Not my favorite. Then we move on to our audiobook. So we finished listening to The Body Under the Piano by Maith Joycelyn, I think is how you say it. So this is an interesting one. It's actually the first book in a series, and the main character is Agatha Morton, and her friend is Hector Perot. So if those sound familiar to you, it's kind of a play on Agatha Christie, and in the author's note at the end, it talks about that she studied Agatha Christie's life, and she took some events and put them into the character, and kind of what would influence a child or growing up, so that when they're an adult, they write these amazing like crime mysteries and stuff. So it was interesting. I know my husband was not a fan of it. It was longer, but it was good. It kept us guessing till near the end who the actual murderer was. And it was a little bit detailed. So I think I would say probably 10 and up maybe would be best, but just because of some of the subject matter. But it was an okay thing to listen to. Then so along with our Story of the World, my kids did a lot of independent reading that goes along with it. A lot of them this month was from the Who Was series. So there was Who Was Rosa Parks. So this is my 3 oldest boys, so 10, 11, and 13, who read these books, and then my daughter just looks through them, who's 7. So this is one of them. Another one was Who Was Neil Armstrong? And then there was also What Was the Berlin Wall? Who was Che Guevara? Who was Fidel Castro? Who was JFK? Who was Albert Einstein? And who was Amelia Earhart? And then they also read some other books, which was the Cold War, What Caused the Vietnam War, and What Was the Vietnam War? And I think that's all of them. So there was quite a lot of those independent readings this month. So moving on to my 13-year-old, he read The Cricket in Times Square by George Selden. I've actually never read this book. And actually all 3 of my older boys read it this month, so I don't know much about it. I've heard it a lot. They all seem to like it. There's that one. He wrote down he read a whole bunch of Rick Riordan books because he loves those. And then he read The Well by Mildred D. Taylor. He said it was good. This one. And then he also read from the same author, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. This is actually my book from when I was younger. I don't remember a whole lot about this book, but he said he enjoyed it. And there you go. And he was saying that this one, I think, came before this one. So yeah. And then he also read this one here, The Battle of the Labyrinth, Percy Jackson, Rick Riordan book. And it's like a graphic version of it. And I think my second son read this book as well. And then my 11-year-old, again, those same books, he read some of those. And then he also read The Last Olympian. Again, my kids are big Rick Riordan fans right now. My 10-year-old, he read The Cricket in Times Square. And then he read The Trials of Apollo, books number 2 and 3. This is 3 and 4. So those books, he's really, again, liking that author and those books. My 7-year-old, she read A Grain of Rice. This is a book that we read 2 years ago, last year. It's quite a short one, so it's a good one. And then she read this one here, Little House in the Big Woods. And I don't know, she said it was okay, which is kind of interesting because this is a book I really enjoy. So I love this book. And then me. So I read 2 books. The first one is Sins of the Mother by Irene Kelly. This book was really hard to read. I thought it was going to be more of a story, more kind of like fictional. But it's really detailed about the author's life and the consequences of things that happened, abuse, and just kind of this whole era of not valuing children, that children are a burden and a hassle. And so it was really hard to read, but it was really interesting. It was interesting for me too because it takes place in Ireland and England. And my mom is from England, and some things that she's told me about her growing up days were similar in the sense like she was sent out to work quite young, and every payday her mom my grandma would be waiting at the door for her to hand over her paycheck because that's what was expected. And that happened in the book as well, and just kind of how families were at the time. Interesting but really hard to read. And then the other book I read was this one here, Becoming by Michelle Obama. I just finished this one last night, and there's some pictures in here too. I really enjoyed this book. I knew very little about Michelle Obama or her husband. I'm Canadian, and so I heard about him, and when he became president, her husband, I started hearing about her, but I really didn't know much. And so this book was really, really interesting. She talks a lot about her upbringing and her family, and kind of her husband's path to becoming a politician and her struggles with it, because she says she's not a fan of politics even today, as well as finding her own position as he went into the White House for 8 years, what her role was going to be, because she had been working full-time prior to that and she wasn't anymore. And then also a lot about race, about beliefs that are held, about challenges in America. So it was really interesting. I highly recommend it. My 13-year-old has asked to read it next, so we'll see what he thinks of it, but I really, really enjoyed it. And that's it. Those are all the books. So if you've read any of these, let me know in the comment section down below what you've thought of them, or if you have any questions, I can answer them for you too. Otherwise, I hope this finds you having a great day. Take care.